If you are lucky enough to have a pageant introduction that you get to present on stage, you gotta know how important that first impression is, not just to the judges, but to the audience as well. You wanna engage the audience and ensure that they are gonna be cheering extra loud for you. So in this episode, I'm gonna give you a 5-step process to make your introduction easily come together and ensure that it is intelligent and authentic and memorable and exciting and engaging and all of the things that need to happen in about 30 seconds or less. Hey there, welcome back to the Win a Pageant podcast. My name is Alycia Darby, and today we're talking about your pageant introduction that you'll be presenting on stage. Now, it's most common for on-stage introductions to be a part of a little girl pageant, even up to the Miss contestants, but oftentimes you'll see this in junior Miss and in princess pageants and things like that, where it gives the contestants an opportunity to speak on stage without having to do an on-stage question or something like that. This you'll see very commonly in a lot of pageant systems that cater to the younger contestant. This training you are able absolutely to use for a younger contestant. But since I work with adult clients and even a few brave teens, the training that I'm going to teach you is really from that perspective, okay? So it's something that anybody can use at any level, but we're going to be focusing on how adult women can use this as a pageant introduction. There's a big difference between the introduction that you do when you just walk up to the mic and you say your name and your contestant number. What we're talking about in this episode is when you're actually writing a 30-second, let's say, introduction that you'll have an opportunity to give to the judges and usually also to your audience, okay? So this is different than the video that we did about the introduction inside your private interview. This one is on stage and we've crafted it very differently, okay? Now the introduction is usually not scored. However, for systems that it is scored, this process will work exactly the same, okay? I gave you a downloadable guide. I created this for you so that you can follow along and do this even at home as we go through this process, because it's something that, you know, your pageant introduction has to be personalized to you, but you can still follow this strategy to create it, okay? So check out the link below if you want to download that guide so you can make sure you've got it in your hands as we go through this episode. Now, the very first step to writing this beautiful, authentic, engaging, exciting pageant introduction is to first understand you in every area of life. There is a concept called the Wheel of Life, which is essentially like, imagine like a circle graph that has a bunch of little pie pieces in it, okay? And each one of these pie pieces represents a different area of your life. Things like career and family and finances. And there's a lot of them on there. So get the guide. So you've got the whole list that I've got for you there. And the first step that you're going to do is identify one accolade, like something that stands out about you, some achievement that you have in every single area of the Wheel of Life. So share one accolade about your career, something you did awesome, or about your family, about your finances, in all of these different areas, okay? Now, let me give you an example. You might say, for example, in your career that you were promoted to manager within the first 6 months at your company. Or you might say that you achieved a C-suite position like CEO or COO, a C-suite position just 5 years into your work with the company. Things like that, okay? Maybe you still hold the record for the most sales in a rookie year, okay? Maybe you got an internship. Out of the 50,000 people that applied at Google, you were one of the top 3 that ended up getting the internship, okay? That's the kind of thing you want to be thinking about, the big things that you've done for your career. And just one is plenty, but if you think of 2 or 3, just write them down anyway, okay? Now, we want to also do this for family. Maybe you say, I'm a mom of 5, or over the last 24 years, I've fostered 35 children, okay? Things like this are related to your family. Now, again, you're going to get this download and go through the whole list: finances, personal development, fitness, health, all of these different areas, because we want to really mine for all of these, you know, the ones that come to your mind at first might be career, it might be the easy stuff. But when you think about your spiritual development and your personal development and in your relationship to others and in your friendships, how do all of those things, you might have accolades that you haven't thought of in years, okay? Now, a caution for you, especially for my adult contestants, it's easy when you are 7 to think of a couple of things in these areas that you did that were kind of cool, right? Even when you're 13. But when you're 35, what you don't want to do is go too far back. So if you're 35 in your career area, you're not going to say something that you were, valedictorian of your graduating class or something, because that was so long ago. You want to try to keep these accolades within about the last 10 years. Now, let's say that you're like, but I can't think of anything else in this category. Great, pull it from the past, okay? Because you'll see in step 3 why those things can help you pull it all together, okay? Now, step 2, imagine you've got the wheel of life and you've got an accolade in each one of those. Here is step 2. I want you to go through all of those accolades. These are achievements. An accolade is something that you got awarded for or that you got recognized for. It was an achievement that other people also could recognize, okay? What you're going to do is go through that giant list that you just made of how awesome you are, and you're going to choose about 5 of them. 5 of them that really stand out. They feel really important to you, and you just think these are the best things ever. Now, don't overthink this part, okay? If you're like, well, I could only come up with like 7, I couldn't narrow down to 5. It's fine. Just start with that, okay? You're really just trying to identify what are the things that you value the most. Here we want to pull out your values from all of your achievements, okay? So don't overthink this part. Just go through it and say, yep, that's one I love, this one I love. Try to choose about 5. Now, in step 3, this is where I said things are going to start to come together, okay? When you are looking at those top 5 accolades, those achievements, those awards, those big moments that you have experienced in your life, I want you to consider the common thread that ties these things together. What is similar about these 5 things? So for example, maybe when you're looking at it, you're like, wow, all of these things are like super out of the box thinking, or you might be like, you know what? It's so interesting that all 5 of these have a relationship to serving and helping other people. Or maybe you'll be like, you know what? This is pretty impressive. All of these things are how I overcame challenges that I experienced in my life. Now, usually when I do this with my clients, we're able to come up with at least 2 common threads about those 5 areas, but sometimes there might be 4. You might be like, well, it could be this, it could be this. Whatever those are, just jot them down. What do you think are the common thread that would tie each of these pieces together? What's similar about them? Okay, now step 4. In step 4, you are going to be creating a brief paragraph just mentioning each one of these 5 accolades. Now, by now, you may have narrowed it down to 5 if you had 7 to begin with, or you may have pulled in a few more that also fit that thread, okay? This is great. You want to create a paragraph that kind of pulls that theme together, okay? The goal with this is that we don't want to just spew out a bunch of random facts and stuff because people won't be able to follow it. We want to give them sort of a theme that houses everything together. In a moment, I'm going to give you an example of that, okay? How I do this is I usually write a phrase or a sentence for each one of the accolades, and then I sort of weave them together, maybe even with like a cute beginning or something like that. And then in the end is when I actually put in the mandatory elements, your name, your age, your hometown, if those are things that you need to include, okay? I do those at the end because they're easier to work in at the end than to try to work everything else around them, okay? So let me read for you an example of how this might actually show up by using these accolades and then putting them into motion here, okay? All right, here we go. This is my make-believe person, Rachel McKinley, okay? This is not a real client of mine, but it's just an example for you, okay? I've always been one step ahead of the crowd. I finished high school 1 year early, which allowed me to spend my summer before college learning Spanish abroad. I started my freshman year as the first female on the soccer team, and believe me, it's harder than it sounds, but that prepared me to live in Anaheim, California, and at the age of 19, I was the youngest paid intern at Disney. I hope to be the first female president, but first, I'd like to stand out as Miss Title Holder. With 1 foot forward, I'm Rachel McKinley. Okay, so you see how we're going to find what's the thread. In this example, you may have noticed that the thread was being one step ahead, being sort of like an outstanding example, the first to do this, the first to do this, the first to be the future president of the United States, first female, those types of things, the first, that's the thread that we used for this example with Rachel. Okay, now step 5. And then after I give you this step, I'm going to share with you what you need to do to actually pull it all together to present it on stage. Okay. Okay. So step 5, you got to actually edit some stuff out. Okay. You cannot, usually your very first draft is going to be very verbose. So you don't want to have everything in there. You got to trim some things. Okay. But what do you trim? First of all, you're going to trim out anything that feels repetitive. Okay. If it feels like, well, yeah, but we already kind of said that over here, take it out in one place or the other. Okay. The other thing you're going to trim out is connecting statements. So in some cases, we say things like all the while, or, and even so, things like this that are just kind of fluffy, don't need to be there. Okay. Trim that stuff out. You want these to be sentences, to be short and quick and sweet. And that's what's going to keep it feeling spunky. Okay. And that's really important because it helps the audience to stay engaged. Now, the next thing you're going to take out is anything that feels unrelated or unimpressive. So if you're like, this part is kind of like lame. No one's really doing this. No one really gives a rip anymore. Just take that part out, okay? So if you the reason we start with 5 accolades is so that there is still room for you to trim it down a bit, okay? You don't have to say all 5 in your final introduction, but you can have space to kind of trim some of these out. This is also a good time for you to swap. If you are like, I remember this one accolade that I came up with in a different category, I think it would fit really well here, and it would replace this thing perfectly. Perfect. Swap it out, okay? That's a great thing to do. This editing process is really actually quite important, okay? Now, I promised that I would tell you what can you do to fit this all together. It's all about how it is delivered. You have to practice it, but don't just practice it saying it over and over and over. What I recommend is that you practice it as a performance. And any actor that's creating a performance, they always have their lines in front of them for weeks before they go off book. The reason for that is because you want to know what it is you're trying to say and not have to remember the words. What you're trying to do at this stage is that you're really practicing the emotions. You're practicing how to deliver it, okay? So have it in front of you. When I work with my clients and we're going through their introduction, I don't say, okay, I hope you have it memorized by the next time we talk. We might still be editing it for a while. So I don't want you to memorize it right away. Instead, I want you to be able to perform it. And you will find that as you practice while you're reading and you're able to perform it, you're kind of making it fun, you're bringing it to life. That's going to be the thing that helps get it into your body and into your brain. It's going to make your memorization stage so much easier, okay? And that, my dear, is how you win a pageant. Thanks for joining today. See you next time.